to our first story of the day. The search is on for scores of prisoners who escaped from a prison near the capital, Abuja, after rain damaged part of the building and brought down a perimeter fence. At least 118 prisoners managed to break free. The prison authorities said 14 inmates have been recaptured and a massive manhunt is underway to find the rest. Arise News correspondent Ferdinand Duroa reports.
Laborers work frantically to rebuild the perimeter fence destroyed during the jailbreak. Authorities say this part of the facility caved in during a heavy downpour. The affected area was then bulldozed by some inmates to escape the facility. The Minister of Interior, Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, is undertaking a tour to the center to assess the extent of damage. He apologizes for the lapses which enabled the jailbreak. The minister says the major reason for the security breach is the overcrowded state of the facility. Ojo laments that the facility built to house about 250 inmates held over 490 before the jailbreak. Many of them are awaiting trial.
The manhunt is presently ongoing. We will do everything humanly possible to make sure that everyone is brought back.
The minister says plans will be expedited to complete custodial centers under construction so overcrowded facilities can be decongested.
And also, the president has also always been talking about urbanization eating into our correctional centers. And this is a clear testimony. You can look at the environment. It shows that we need to relocate a lot of our correctional centers we need to relocate them away from city centers.
The medium security custodial center, Suleja, is located in the heart of the city. Analysts say the large population of the area threatens the security of the facilities. Some of the residents speak on the jailbreak.
It was last night, there was a heavy downpour. So as a result, the windstorm now fell the fence of the correctional service here. So at least it's true that medium they use to now break part of the wall. Over hundreds that came out of the building, which most of them now took this route. If you can see, there are a pair of shoes there, and here these are their belongings.
When I saw the fence fall, just hook one room, they have been coming out. We have been having them that do not run again.
Meanwhile, President Bola Tinubu has charged the judicial arm of government to embark on reforms that will ensure a functional justice system. This, the president said, will support a rapidly growing economy, guarantee basic human and political rights, as well as provide security and justice to all Nigerians. Tinubu's comments were conveyed by Vice President Kashim Shettima to participants at this year's National Summit on Justice in Abuja on Saturday. According to Tinubu, much could be achieved when institutions of government will unite to acknowledge their challenges and brainstorm with a view to proffering solutions to the problems bedeviling Nigeria. In a related development, President Tinubu and Senate President Godswill Akpabio have asked the judiciary to expedite action on the reform of the justice sector in order to address systemic challenges and serve justice to Nigerians. The president also demanded accountability from the judiciary. I'm now being joined by Dr. Uju Agomoh, founder and director, Prisoners, Rehabilitation and Welfare and Action, PRAWA, a security, justice, and development-focused NGO for some focus on this prison break and other issues relating to the justice sector. Good to have you here on This Day Live, Dr. Agomoh. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Agomoh, two things before us. This prison break, let's start with it. And then we look at justice sector reform, which has also been a major subject this week at a workshop, in Abuja. Now, these prisons are so porous, they're always breaking down. Either the roof will cave in, or there will be small rainfall, the fence will fall off. as we saw in this case, in this latest case in Suleja. At other times, it's the prisoners themselves that will break loose, as we have seen in Benin, in Oko, in Cotton Cafe, and now we have also seen a similar incident in Okitipupa. The Minister of Interior says the problem is urbanization. Is urbanization really the problem? The fact that these prisons are in the cities now. Is urbanization the problem? And when they say they want to fix the fences, the perimeter fence, do they just carry block and cement and erect? What if rain falls tomorrow and the fence collapses again? What is the problem with our correctional centers?
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Ruben. And again, thanks for having me. I think it is important that we look at this problem from a very comprehensive perspective. So first, I speak about the issue of urbanization. So there is some point here in terms of what the minister had mentioned. And this was also why in the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, there were some specifications as regarding the distance between the custodial centers and the outside community. It's specifically indicated. But you see, usually most of the time when those custodial centers were built, the population had not grown the way it had grown, okay? But that's not the only problem. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think one of our biggest problem is that we do not fully operate in such a way that we accord to correctional centers the different facility they require, devices they require in terms of security, in terms of infrastructure, vis-a-vis the security classification of those custodial centers. I'm going to explain a little bit what I mean. Every inmate have different risk level. So it's not every inmate that requires the same level of security. People have different reasons why they get into crime, as it were, if they do. And as I always say, there are also people who are there who are innocent. There are also people who are there who are minor offenders. But certainly there are people who are there who are hardened criminals. So, but then the risk levels are different. So we have several custodial centers, over 240 something, plus what is called satellite and lockups. These are smaller facilities in locations where there are no custodial centers, but you have a court there. Now, the first problem is that this dimension that I have mentioned, which is we need to have different categorization, not just by name, not by saying you have this is a maximum security facility. Once you have that categorization, you make sure that the support system for the custodial service in relation to that categorization is done. You also make sure that the inmates, the risks and needs analysis and assessment of the inmates are done, and they are allocated to the different custodial centers in relation to their security needs or in relation to the risk level of the inmates. The final level is that the regime, the activities that you do within those custodial facilities must be aligned with the kind of the categorization of the facility, but also with the type of inmate that are sent there. That is our first biggest problem, okay? So if you look at the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, and one of the things that really pains me, Ruben, I must say, is that it's not that these things are rocket science. It's not that people have not spoken or thought about this. There had been a law which was designed to meet the needs. So if you go to the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, specifically Section 28 addressed this issue. And maybe I will give you a little background in terms of that Section 28. Remember that what came up as the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 was actually 8 private member bills, 4 from the House of Rep and 4 from the Senate that was later on harmonized and all of that. One of those bills was about security, specifically. And that was what was captured under Section 28. If you look at Section 28, there is sub 1, sub 2, sub 3. The sub 3 of that Section 28 clearly said that priority, and maybe, sometimes it's maybe important to also relate this so that you see word for word what the law have said. It says that priority should be given to maximum security facilities. So those things that you see that is listed, and just permit me, Dibran, please, because I think this is really important. Those things that is stated that we should do, we have not done them. And I beg to ask that if we do not take this as an emergency and react immediately to make sure that for the maximum security facility, these things are done, we will have another instance, and we will continue to have it. And we can't continue like this as a nation. Now, look at Section 28. Section 28 clearly says here, and the sub-theme of that Section 28 is security of custodial centers. It says there shall be provided monitoring devices to protect, control, and safeguard correctional activities, including, of course, observatory towers. Now, watch another thing. Double perimeter walls. What is a double perimeter wall? It means that you have the first ring of the security wall, then you have another one. So even if one fell, the other one would still be standing. And you see that. You go to correctional centers in Zambia, you still see double perimeter walls. It's not, no facility in Nigeria has it. So it continues that way. It talks about the closed circuit television and all of the things that needs to be body scanners, e-monitoring devices, electronically activated alarm systems, and other instruments of restraint. Now, look at what is said in sub 3. In deploying the facilities under sub 1, priority shall be given to the security requirements of maximum security custodial centers. You see, that's the problem. So we need to make sure that we implement this. So it's about facility, but it's not only about facility. You need to also understand that literally what has happened is that you have the weakened facilities as we have identified it. You have problem in terms of adequate profiling in terms of risk and needs assessment of inmates and putting them there, as I have said. Then you have overcrowding. That is a big problem, because when the facilities are overstretched, there is very little the custodial officers will do because they cannot attend to them very well. So again, it is beyond just the issue of the distance, is also beyond just the issue of the facility. It's much more, okay? But again, as I said, there are provisions to address that. If you look at Section 12 of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act, it tells you what to do about congestion, but we're not addressing it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that the Minister of Interior said is that Suleja medium security facility was built during the colonial era to hold
1914. 1914, yes.
To hold 250 inmates.
1914, yeah.
But that, it became a place for 499 inmates. And I think that same situation is replicated elsewhere. So how do we deal with the problem of congestion within the spectrum of the justice administration system? Because justice administration system will seem to cover the entire spectrum.
Yes, you are really very truthful, and the point here is very clear. The minister is very correct, and you have, and this was actually what that Section 12 I mentioned to you was bearing to care of. That Section 12 is actually Section 12 sub 4 to 12 of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019. I will explain a little bit what that means. So it's not all custodial centers that are overstretched. There are some facilities that are underlocking in terms of their capacity. However, most of the ones that are in cosmopolitan cities are all overstretched. About 30 custodial centers have the bulk of the problem, and it's very some more than 300% their capacity, some 200% over their capacity, some more. So the Minister of Interior is completely correct. And this is something that is bad. And when you look at that Section 12 sub 4 to 12 I mentioned to you, what he just said, because in every custodial center, you have a designated capacity. When you walk in, you will see it clearly stated there on their board. So they all know the capacity. So that Section 12 sub 4 says that when the superintendent, that is the officer who is in charge of the custodial center, or the controller in charge of the state observes that this particular facility is overstretching or going beyond the designated capacity, that is the lockup, what is called the lockup, total lockup, is exceeding the particular designation in terms of the capacity. He is supposed to activate an early warning signal by notifying the chief judge, notifying the Attorney General of the state, notifying the Prerogative of Mercy Committee, and all of that. And all of the agencies they're supposed to notify are agencies that have the power to do something about the population. And that same section 12 says that these agencies have 3 months to do something. And after 3 months, if they don't do anything to reduce that population, that the custodial center should refuse to accept further. You know, and the reason is just to make sure that they do the needful. Within the same constraint, it tells you the different options of what we need to do. And I just take one example. We have a very robust and a very beautiful provision in the Nigerian Correctional Service. In short, the entirety of Part 2 of that law talks about non-custodial measures. Let me say, it is not everybody who is in custody need to be there. There are persons that it is better to grant non-custodial sanction. Okay? And when you grant those people non-custodial sanction, meaning instead of keeping them in the custody, they are supposed to serve their sentences in the community, it helps. And I give you very simple examples. Section 37 sub 1 of that same Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 tells us 5 different approaches that we can use. Let me tell you, for example, 1. So that person may be sent to do what is called community service. Community service is a sanction that recognizes the interests of the community, because anytime there is an offense that is committed, it's not just about the particular offender you just take and put in custody, if you will, that it means it ends. Then you are victim, there is also the community that is affected. So community service says that you will do unpaid labor. You work, but not to be paid for that work. In return, back to, I say, something given back to the society. And you imagine when you do that, you are saving costs. Imagine comparing that to putting somebody in custody where the government is spending money to feed. I will also let people also know that there are costs in terms of imprisonment, but I will come back to that if I do have time. Second is probation. And what does probation say? Probation says that the court gives you a probation order, meaning I identify that there are risk factors that led you to getting into crime. Maybe you were using drugs, maybe you had little or no education, maybe you had no jobs. So they will say, okay, we will not put you in custody, but on the basis that you, within this period, you go and learn these skills, you go and do a drug treatment program, whatever it is that they felt that the court will see that if they deal with, your chances of reoffending will be reduced. That is the value of probation, because it looks at the risk factors for the offender, it focuses on the offender and makes sure that he tries to reduce the offending. Well, the third is restorative justice. Mm-hmm.
No, you are going to talk about restorative justice.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. The third is restorative justice. And listen, the beauty of restorative justice is that it's focusing on the victim. Because our current justice system is so that almost that the victim is missing. But by the way, the victim has had some hurt. And that's why the victims don't see that justice have really been served. So it's not just about helping as an alternative, but it also helps to increase the value that people see in terms of the justice system. So restorative justice says that once a victim in the crime, you bring to where there is a possibility, there's some issues of victim-offender mediation sometimes. All that the victim wants is, why me? They want a closure. They want somebody to say, I'm sorry for hurting you. So that is also another aspect which can either be added on to any other sanction or can stand alone. We also have parole. You know, parole means that you have been sentenced for a particular offense, but you have been of good behavior. In terms of looking at the issue of reintegration, they say, okay, you spend the rest of your sentence outside. So, Ruben, you can see all of these things is meant to reduce the burden on the government, reduce the cost of imprisonment, so that the correctional officers will be able to have that facility to deal with the people who needs to be dealt with. And again, everybody knows that we have a problem of awaiting trial person, unprecedented number of persons who have not been convicted. Now, why that is a problem? Remember I told you it's not all custodial centers that are overcrowded. The Controller General has the power to move somebody from one custodial center to any custodial center in the country. But see, if that person is still going to court, it becomes a challenge. So if most of the people who are in custody are people who have been sentenced, it makes it easy. The same thing, the zonal coordinator can do that within the zone. The state controller can do that within the zone. So we need to transform our system to make sure that pre-trial detention is so very reduced. And that's what brings back to what the whole court judiciary needs to do. The role of the judiciary. Okay. The role of the prosecutory agencies, and all the rest, yeah?
Well, Dr. Agomoh, I wanted to draw your attention to a publication at page 10 of this day newspaper today, Sunday, April 28. by Enough is Enough, EIE Nigeria. It's titled Prison Congestion in Nigeria. And that's what that, full-page publication is talking about. It says we have 253 custodial centers, 78,159 inmates. 69% of these inmates are awaiting trial. In these custodial centers, feeding allowance for inmates is 750 naira daily. Security dogs are fed with 800 naira daily. So this is part of the problem. But you've mentioned a number of ways in which these, correctional facilities can be decongested. But you also mentioned minors. The Child Rights Act of 2003 and the Children and Young Persons Act says that you can't put in prison people who are below the age of 12. And yet they are part of the crisis that we're trying to define and resolve. So what do you think can be done in this particular regard?
Okay. There was a lot of things that you brought to bear with your this last question, or I need to explain that you see that the statistics you have doesn't give you the full picture. So when you say generally you have about 69% of persons who have not been convicted in some location, that is in terms of the general. Remember, there are some, as I have said, that are under locking and some that are just about average. So facilities like Ikoyi Correctional Center, facilities like Port Harcourt Correctional Center, sometimes these populations are about 90% of the capacity, 90% of the people in that custodial center that have not been convicted. So imagine the horror of that situation, because anybody who has not been convicted is not settled down to talk about rehabilitation. All they want is, which day am I going to court, and all of the things. I need to go out, I need to leave, I need to be released, and all the rest of that. So it's difficult to even plan proper rehabilitation and reintegration for them. So that is one key issue. So I needed us to understand the fact that it is not just about that gem, because if you say 69, they will think, oh, it's maybe not too bad. There are some places that it is 90%. The other problem is that in terms of the duration, it's not just about saying this is the population. We need to understand two particular factors. One is the rates people are being received into custody, reception rate. The second is the duration in custody. You need to deal with these two factors to be able to bring down the population. So that is a big issue. So when we are looking at steps and interventions, we need to see what are those steps that can bring diversion, what are those steps that ensure that it is only those people who need to be in custody that are in custody, and the rates of bringing becomes something that is manageable. Again, the issue of duration in custody is also another factor. You raised also another point, which is about children. Our organization, PRAWA, had done a research of all of, actually it's titled National Assessment of Children and Young Adults in custody and in conflict with the law and deprived of their liberty. We got information from all remand centers, remand homes in the whole country. We got data in relation to all the custodial centers in the country. We got data in relation to all the postal institutions. And this is with the support actually of the UNICEF and European Union. This data, it's mind-blowing. You cannot imagine what their data is given. And on Wednesday, Thursday, this week coming, we will be able to be in the final technical review on this. But see what is happening. There are 29 states that have remand homes in the country. So the question, therefore, is what is happening to the others that don't have remand homes? Even FCT does not have a facility that we are processing persons who are young offenders. You have FCT, you have Abia, you have Anambra, you have, and many others. Okay? So that is one issue. The second issue here is that the Buster institutions, which is where the correctional service is actually in charge of young offenders in Buster institutions. We have 3 functional ones at the moment in the country. You have Kakuri in Kaduna, you have Abeokuta, you have Ilorin. Think geographically where are those places are located. So what happens is that in the other places, many times you see the ages of young people exaggerated so that they can be taken in. And that's why you see a lot of young persons who are in custody. And by the way, the correctional officer, they will just want to look at the warrant. If the warrant puts a particular age, then if they says that something else, and if they feel they can take it, it's within what they are allowed, they take that person.
Dr. Agomoh,
and within the...
Dr. Agomoh, do all these issues that we have identified justify jailbreak?
No. But nothing can justify jailbreak, Ruben. But the question here is that we need to take our security more seriously. And I think we need to do the needful. It's just think, for example, about your home. If you want to protect your home, what do? You have to make sure that you guard your home well. So that is why we need to say Section 28 sub 3 must be activated ASP. It has to ASAP. We need to see this as a national emergency. Because think of all of the effort of the entire justice system. In one swoop, those persons will leave the custodial centers and then look at the risk that the society and the community are being presented with. So nothing can ever justify anything. But these are explanations to why we are where we are, and this explanation should guide us in developing sustainable intervention that will help us to address the matter. That is very critical.
Which takes me to the workshop held in Abuja this week, justice sector reform, at the end of which the communique focused on a number of issues, appointments to the bench and the powers of the heads of the courts, both the Supreme Court and at the Federal High Court level and the State High Court. Funding and budget, and then, of course, delays in justice administration. On paper, you know, the communique read out by Ajibade ASSN will look nice, but will anybody follow through? This is not the first time we're talking about justice sector reform.
I was at the National Justice Summit, you know, and I must tell you that a lot of work went into that process, because that summit also saw the presentation of the National Justice Policy, the updated version of the National Justice Policy, which has clear specification of about 19 themes. And if those policies are addressed by both the federal level agencies and the state level agencies, we will definitely make certain tractions. Secondly, at the conference, there were clear discussions in relation to different, including appointments. I mean, I chaired one of the sessions that talked about issues relating to appointment of judicial officers at the state level. People were frank. Clear things were said. So the point you are making is key. It's not just about what we agree or what we say publicly, but that certain things are done to action whatever decision have been done. You may also be aware that there are also plans to bring legislative reforms to bear. There are plans to bring certain levels around monitoring courts and doing certain things to ensure that some of these things are addressed. Okay, so the judiciary is key, but it is also important that we see the justice system as a system. I think, again, I did make this point at the summit, that one of our major problems is that we do not see the justice system as a system. And what does a system mean? Just imagine your body. Every part of your body is connected. So we can't work with one and leave the other. It needs a holistic intervention. And we need to ensure, just like you said, that the judiciary welfare is taken care of. We should make sure that we professionalize in terms of the service delivery, in terms of that sector. The people you appoint must be people of integrity. Can't be people because you are related to them or because of other kinds of consideration. Because remember that when you get it wrong at the judicial level, what next is left? Is that not supposed to be the last hope
of the common man? Yeah.
So if that last hope is smashed, yes, if the last hope is smashed, are we then asking people to go into self-help? So we also know that there is a very strong connection between what happens in the justice sector and business and development. So people must see that you respect rule of law. They must see that includes that there is accountability. And one of the things that actually I think it's important that we need to do, and this is for every particular sector, as well as every particular arm within the criminal justice system.
Well, on that note,
you know that laws alone doesn't change people.
On that note, Dr. Uju Agomoh, I would like to thank you very much for joining us on this Live This Sunday talk show.